Chapter 26. The Half-Life Head. The bullet punched through the clavicular groove just below the left side of his neck and burrowed into his chest cavity. His body had been corroded and frozen underwater for a long time, and the bullet blasted the wound a dark black color, like a purple rose, gurgling with saucy blood. Of the 3 shots fired, the first one should have hit, and with his reaction time, he wouldn't have given me time to fire a second or third bullet. I lay down in the side ditch and drank a small amount of water. My shrunken stomach had to adapt slowly, and I risked death if I drank enough or not enough. The dagger cut through all the pockets of the body and found a small bag of beef and bread, hunger making me want to devour the food in one gulp. Reason still restrained the impulse, and I spat on some tiny crumbs as the digestive power of my insides gradually cushioned the peristalsis. Using my last bit of strength, I was able to locate the beetle-sized GPS tracker from his heel. I smashed it with the back handle of my dagger, filled his backpack with dirt, tied it to the body, and pushed it into the ditch. That done, it was time to find a place nearby and rest safely for the day. It was about evening, when I felt breathless in my sleep. My hair hurt from tugging, something warm and sticky wrapped around my forehead, and a foul odor hit my nose. Struggling to open my eyes, panic caused the nerves and hairs throughout my body to swell so rapidly that they nearly disintegrated. A greenish-gray floral python was devouring me, the sphincter of its triangular upper jaw expanding wide, 2 rows of thin, misshapen, curved, hooked teeth pointed right at my eyes, clear, viscous saliva hanging from the tips of its teeth, ready to drip down. At any moment, the thick python had wrapped itself around me from my legs to my chest, firmly imprisoning me, so that I couldn't adjust my position to resist. Luckily, I fell asleep with my hands resting on my head, otherwise I could only watch the process of being swallowed. The desire to save my life immediately conditioned the muscles in my arms to swell and spring up, picking at the soft flesh of the python's upper lip with one hand and gouging at its jaws with the other, allowing my head to slowly exit the bloody mouth. The python's twisted snake muscles tightened faster in response to my resistance, its smooth scales rustling against my clothes. My pelvis and ribs cackled as pain swept through my body. Holding on was not an option. One hand had to be free to wrestle with it. Letting go of its jaws, the back of my neck was instantly drilled with pain. The inside of the edge of the python's lower lip also had 2 rows of small, sharp teeth. It didn't want me to slip out of its mouth, closing its mouth hard, its sickle-like teeth nailing into my flesh, hooking and biting me. The dagger at my waist was squeezed tightly in its sheath by the python's body, and it took a great deal of effort to clutch the handle and jerk it out. I couldn't just raise the sharp, pointed knife and stab it into the python that was wrapped around me. The python's scales were slippery, and it was highly likely that I would stab myself to death. The back of my neck was another sharp pain. Couldn't hesitate any longer. The dagger was shoved flat into the gap between my chest and the python's squeezed body, picked up hard, flipped the handle, held my breath, threw and slashed out hard, then shoved it in flat again, slashed out diagonally, and repeated it like crazy. Thick blood spread slowly down my flat chest. The dagger also sliced through my flesh as I shoved it inward, but such a wound was not fatal. The boa constrictor's wounds, however, were severe, and with each outward gouge I made, the boa constricted with convulsions, and its upper and lower jaws closed hard with the pain, trying to bite me to death. The pain in the back of my neck and the rattling of the bones in my body became clearer and clearer. At this time, I have to stand up and turn the pain into strength and ruthlessly cut the python. My breathing has been difficult to the limit, squeezing deformation of the chest cavity so that the lungs cannot inhale oxygen. Eyes gradually fuzzy black, limbs flaccid much unknowingly. Fainted. When I woke up, my body felt like it was weighed down with 1,000 pounds of chains, and there were a million ants gnawing inside me. The python was already dead. I pressed my hand on its jaws, letting the small teeth with barbs slowly pull out from the back of my neck. Another wave of pain drilled into the tip of my heart. Gently stroking my neck, my fingers were covered in sticky, clotted blood. This kind of python hunts its prey by brute force. Luckily, there was no toxin injection. Sore and limp arms moved round and round to dislodge the snake's body that it had wrapped around me and had become rigid, finally breaking free. After chewing and eating the bag of beef and bread, I dragged my heavy body towards the outside of the jungle. Since then, I've always had a soft spot in my heart for pythons, but at this moment, I was surprised to see another one, slithering on a branch 10 meters away, spitting its core and watching the three of us don't get up, let alone run. While whispering to Poe and Sarit, he pondered on a countermeasure. They both covered their mouths and chests as well, kind of gagging. Sarit, in particular, looked like a big girl pregnant for the first time. She's really risking 2 lives by getting pregnant on an island like this until she gives birth. I've seen a lot of greenish-gray pythons, and even though they're huge, they're just a brain-punching shock. But the front suddenly appeared, but a rare golden python. Golden python is not golden yellow, like a yellow pumpkin, just been playing peeling off the skin, white polygonal cutting surface around, across a yellow melon skin. In fact, this is a kind of white python, really if the cruel analogy is a black African man. The whole body suffers from vitiligo, suddenly jumped out of the eyes, so that people roll in fear of sticking to the stomach. The white python wasn't much bigger, less than 2 meters long but young and fat, as inferred from the thickness of its middle. It was the only way out of the woods to the stream, and we could not advance, much less retreat. To pick it off with a wooden pole would be like trying to catch a crocodile with a trout fishing tool, comical and dangerous. It would not let us pass easily. In its view, Poe and Sarit were both favored prey and would most likely attack. Gripping the wrist-thick wooden pole in my hand, I crouched down and slowly approached the white python. Seeing that it was me who came over instead of Poe and Sarit, it was slightly displeased and arched its head, displaying its ruby eyes. Perhaps it was a pretty fellow among its own kind, but the chilly hairs on my body were still shaking with a shrug, bearing the visual impact of the alert coloring on its body. The white python was so exasperated that it actually bounced off the branch and took the initiative to crawl towards me. Striking the snake, striking 7 inches is purely on paper. Even if there is a ruler, I will not go over to measure it. Years of fighting on the battlefield have made me accustomed to the idea that attacking the opponent's head is the driest way to claim a life. The white python shook its body, flung a wavy line on the fallen leaves under the tree, spat out a hissing core, scales rustling, and lunged at me. Feeling its swaying pattern, projected to hit the intersection point on the round arm, dead smash down, just hit it on the top of the melon, robust snake tail immediately left and right wrestling. The ground, withered branches and yellow leaves followed the chaotic flight. Not hesitate and give it a wild swing. Python head splashed with blood, triangular head rotten into a meat pie, like a big red flower on the ground. Stamen facing up, was stepped on a foot. We pulled it up. It weighed 80 pounds, and its skin and flesh were treasures to us. Poe hid behind Sarit before the two of them dared to lean in to see it, and I urged us all to hurry, dragging up the wooden sled and running together toward the creek. When we had nearly reached the stream, we all stopped again, and I climbed a tall tree to watch the movements in the great slough, and then looked more closely at the section of the gully and found no danger. The stream was still flowing swiftly, and the carcasses of the giant bear and alligator were crushed by boulders, just as they had been when we left them yesterday. Perhaps because of the creek wash, the smell of the beast's meat did not spread easily, so the other beasts didn't get to forage here. I told Poe and Sarit to stand on the edge of the ditch and catch the meat I threw up while keeping watch. Moving those boulders out of the way, I gouged my hand into the wound in the giant crocodile's spine and turned it over, poking in the dagger to cut it, causing the hard skin to separate from the bone and flesh. and a lot more blood to bubble out. The giant crocodile actually convulsed, scaring me so much that I broke out in a cold sweat and almost jumped up the creek gully. Perhaps it was the shock of the current, coupled with yesterday's experience, that caused me to hallucinate. It was a relief to pick up the boulder and slam it against the giant crocodile's skull again. The meat was cut out in large chunks and tossed to Poe and Sarit, who were both happy and nervous as they yard to the wooden sled. The two small and medium sleds are full, Sarit told me from the bank. The giant crocodile was reduced to a mere skeleton by my chipping and picking the shredded red meat and silvery white ligaments remaining on the bones, shivering in the stream. The next step was to exploit the giant bear, whose skin had been on my mind since last night. I opened the bear's mouth, pushed the dagger between its gums and lips, and took as much of the skin as possible. The water in the stream was again red with blood, and it took a great deal of effort to peel off the surprisingly large skin and swing it up the stream, where Poe rushed to avoid it, fearing that the bear's blood would stick to his body. Put the skins aside for now, and load the largest wooden sled with all the bear meat. Sarit hums and nods. The meat was cut from the behemoth, only to realize that there was more than expected, requiring 3 wooden sleds to be fully loaded and barely moved twice to carry it all. I climbed up the creek gully and tied the beasts on the 3 sleds securely with hemp canes. There were about 200 pounds of alligator meat on the small sled, 300 pounds on Sarit's sled, and 600 pounds on mine. I had been worried that the 2 girls' bodies wouldn't be able to handle that much weight. Change formation. I'll be at the front, Sarit in the center, and Poe to the back. After saying that, I walked over to Poe's front, cupped her small face with both hands, and rubbed my thumbs on her delicate eyelids and said, "You and Sarit just need to lift the sled handles and control the balance. I'll be the front end of the power output." She blinked her big, chubby eyes and nodded at me. I said to her again, "We have to carry this food back. Don't be afraid. I am here." "I'm not scared." "Sarit is," Poe said with her mouth cocked up. "Well then, the hauling begins." With that said, I stood up and glanced at Sarit. She smiled and nodded. The fat bearskin was wrapped around my bare upper body to prevent the thick hemp vines from sinking into my flesh as I pulled the sled. The stretch from the creek to the woods was not particularly well traveled, and the pitted gravel underfoot made the wooden sleds bumpy. Into the woods, the 3 wooden sleds slid with less difficulty. It's a good thing I had a sturdy bearskin, or the flesh on my shoulder would have blossomed from the hemp vines strangling. Chapter 27. The Hanging Wooden Sledge. On the way, I whispered to them what we were pulling. Sarit said gold. Poe said riel. I said both. We're correct, so let's pull hard and hold on. The 2 of them smiled and nodded straight. Uh-huh. Pull hard. Don't let go. This way of quenching the thirst of plums, although some results, but they are still very strenuous, their faces sweating profusely, and I feel like my whole upper body is soaked in water. It was quite dangerous to drag so much naked, fresh meat through the woods, and while I couldn't stop whispering and teasing the 2 of them with a smile on my face, I was nervous. A real wild leopard mountain pig or something like that scampering over, hoping to pounce on the meat on the sled or me, and attacking Poe and Sarit would be awful. I felt bulky now, bundled up in thick bearskins and with multiple thick hemp vines over my shoulders, hampering the effectiveness of my first counterattack, dragging the largest wooden sled ahead of us, like old oxen harnessed to a 3-horse wagon, able to pull but not fast enough to run. Poe and Sarit, who are too soft and naturally of a small family skeleton, had a hard time and did their best to walk with me so far up the forest road. From the veins bulging in my neck, the 2 of them saw that it wasn't easy for me to walk in front of them with over 1,000 pounds of fresh meat in tow, so instead of just controlling the balance of the sled, as I had said I would, they sneaked in a little more force and pulled on the sled together. The journey back was uneventful, and no beasts of prey were encountered. Only a leopard cat, which followed us all the way on the right flank, wanted to take a piece of fresh meat from the sled. but at the same time was afraid to approach. The leopard cat was slightly larger than an ordinary cat, but not nearly as large as a real leopard. Suddenly look, it is surrounded by spots in the jungle. Leopard close to will also be startled when to see its small size. Do not feel a kind of want to take a stick to chase and beat the feeling of superiority. When we got to the cave, I told Poe and Sarit to go inside and rest for a while I carried the fresh meat from the 3 wooden sleds into the cave by myself. At first they both refused to rest and stubbornly wanted to work with me. I told them, take the time to regain your strength and before dark, carry back the leftover meat in the creek gully and the day will be won. They both understood what I meant and obediently went into the cave. As I untied the twine that bound the meat, Miyu, holding the baby, couldn't stop looking at me. From the cave, worried about us too. All the meat is stacked on the rocky outcrop in the cave, more than a man's height. It's too late to dry the meat today, so I hope it doesn't rain tomorrow, or else this hard-earned food will rot and spoil. The dagger cut off a few chunks of fat crocodile meat, sliced it thinly, and baked it on the burning stone basin, where it instantly bubbled with oil and white smoke drifted into the nose, increasing one's hunger. After the food was cooked, I took a lot of it to Miyu, and although there was no trout, the crocodile meat was just as nutritious so that she could produce enough milk to feed her baby. Poe and Sarit had actually fallen asleep, thinking that the two were exhausted.
Sarit, Po, come?
And eat. I shouted a few times. Sarit woke up first. She nudged Poe, signaling her to get up and eat the meat. Poe rubbed her sleepy eyes and sat down by the fire in a daze, eating the roasted meat I handed her. The meal was short, and after a drink from the stream, I blocked the cave door tight again, and the 3 of us tugged up the wooden sled and set off as we had done in the morning. We resumed our original formation, with Sarit at the end, me at the front, and Poe in the center. The pace through the forest was much slower, and the short break didn't allow the coming girls to replenish much of their energy. It was a little too cruel to urge them both to go faster, but the thought of the danger of returning in the dark made me a little anxious, and I could only dig in myself. I stopped and said, this pace will delay us until dark, so you two get on the sledge. Poe and Sarit looked at each other, a little ashamed on their faces, and neither said a word. Let Poe sit. I can run, Sarit said sincerely to me, with a twinkle in her autumn eyes. You are girls with tender bodies and few physical reserves. Loads of exercise are not strong points, just as men are not good at embroidery. There is nothing to be embarrassed about. The 2 girls stopped, smiled mysteriously, and still stood still. I said with some anxiety, hurry up, don't wait until you really run out of stamina. You can't even fight a leopard cat. Sarit drops the sled he's holding and pulls Poe right onto mine. Hold on tight, it will hurt if you fall. After saying that, I pulled up the big wooden sled and started running. The 2 wooden sleds behind me were bolted by the hemp vines and swished to follow. Running speed increased a lot. The 2 girls in the sled to help each other also feel much more comfortable, and some excitement, frequent giggles. I tried to keep it as smooth as possible to prevent both of them from falling off. Both had such delicate skin that the slightest bump would hurt them badly. Poe said from behind me, that's so much fun. It would be so nice to be in the snow. I was already sweating from running, and it cooled me down a bit to be teased by Poe so much that I didn't feel like laughing. The section in the middle of the woods has the highest frequency of snake encounters. I use wooden poles to pick them off. As long as they don't get in the way, I usually don't beat them to death. In case there is a shortage of food one day, it is better to come and catch a few back and risk eating a few meals than to starve to death. Whenever I hear the stream flowing ahead, I am always both happy and nervous. Before leaning into the stream gully, as usual, I climbed a large tree to get a good look before I would pass. I butchered all the remaining meat of the beast, filled 3 wooden sleds, and tied them securely and tightly. The round sun was approaching the sea in the distance, and the sea breeze was blowing gently, making it much cooler. Po said, "It's so comfortable. It would be nice to watch the moon from the top of the mountain at night." My heart sank. After going to the island and keeping Po like a caged bird, she retains a bit of her mischievous childishness, and it's that innocence that brings us all so much fun and means so much more to me. Wait until we get back to the cave, then you can play up the romantic nature of women. We have to hurry, dawdling in the dark. You're the one with the guts. Po and Sarit laughed. Sarit is scared, too. She still can't help it, pouting and retorting. I reordered the sleds, and it was Po's turn to control the little pulling sled in the back. Po, don't be afraid to go back and sleep in my arms tonight, I encouraged her. Okay. She happily agreed. I wrapped up in my thick bearskin again and made the power front end. Passing the place where the python had been fought, I threw the earth away and pulled out the white python. At the sight of it, Po immediately took a few steps back in terror. Coward, you're just a tough talker. Although I blamed Po, I felt the python and got goosebumps. I swung the 80-pound white python onto a meat stack and tucked it under a hemp vine. Okay, get a grip. The sun's red afterglow, spilling obliquely into the trees, gave the island an even wilder air. I was a little more alert, and although the gravity of the sled prevented me from running, my feet stomped the ground as hard as they could to buy time. The snakes in my way looked like I was addicted to picking them, always coiling back into their original branches after each time I threw them far away with a wooden pole. Or maybe I was disturbing them, and the snakes were doing this as a demonstration to me, a sign of protest. Dragging my extremely overdrawn body, I finally safely dragged the beast meat to the cave. As the boulders in the cave were filled with the first batch of animal meat, I found a few more suitable boulders and rolled them into the cave to hold more animal meat. After everything was stabilized, it was completely dark. Tonight, we were all extraordinarily happy to see the cave piled high with food. I told everyone that tomorrow, when the sun comes out, we will use our daggers to cut these fresh meats into thin slices, take them outside to dry on the rocks, and stockpile enough for us to eat for a month. Po asked me, when are we going to catch trout again? I smiled and said, as soon as the fortifications are built. Sarit and Po looked at me with great confusion, not understanding the meaning. They thought that if they blocked a big wooden door at the entrance of the cave, it would be considered a defense, which was far from what I had in mind. I brought Miyu over, and we all gathered around the fire. I drew my idea on the ground with a stone, and everyone was amazed to see it. By completing such a fortification, the space for free movement and safety are greatly increased, both during the day and at night. At the downstream of the stream at the mouth of the cave, identify a section with excellent geology, build a wooden wall more than 2 meters high, and enclose a yard of 5,000 square meters, in which people can bathe and move around as they please, and as long as they do not walk out, there is no need to worry about fierce animals. We all longed for a bigger place to live, and resolved to try to complete the idea within the month. After eating, we went to bathe in the stream. The moon was still the same as last night, and Po and Sarit were still in a joyful mood. Po took my hand and dragged me to the section of the stream where we bathed, and was the first one to strip off, and that girl's reserve that she used to have could not be seen at this moment. Sarit put her own and Po's clothes on the boulder, and the two girls stood bent down in the stream and washed up. During the day, wrapped in the skin of the giant bear, pulled the heavy beast meat twice, upper body once soaked in sweat, the pain of the back wound to endure until now. I lay naked into the stream, feel the whole body all of a sudden fluent and refreshing. Sarit and Po scrubbed with each other, giggling and laughing endlessly, sometimes stirring up the water splash to play. Looking at her too lively and lovely appearance, and think of the two girls today's hard work, did not have the patience to remind them to be more careful, for fear of destroying the fun of the two beautiful girls. I lay on my back in the stream. I kept watching the movements around me, and not long after, I saw Sarit and Po squatting down to wash the young girl's private parts. The two of them saw me watching, not embarrassed, but look at each other, laughing at me. Two pairs of children whitening, a pair of proudly erect, a pair of contours of the first appearance, swaying in the water, hidden, beautiful to the extreme. Poe's body displayed the beauty of a young girl. Sarit's body flaunted the beauty of a young and mature development. Maybe it's the excitement left in my memory from last night. This scene surfaces again. My bottom has lost control, like an eel full of vigor, in the swaying stream, trembling and rising. Chapter 28. Misunderstandings in Night Creek. No matter what the situation was, I had to protect both of them the first time whenever there was danger, and maybe jerking up from the stream, with that big guy in my crotch that was becoming arrogantly lifted, would scare Poe and Sarit. But such a far-out impulse should be seen as cute, and men are sometimes bitter. The impact under the surface of the stream was just right to wash away the wounds on my back, and I felt like an eel bolted between my legs trying to break free, and the pain in my body slowed down a lot as the current swung me back and forth. Poe and Sarit took a little longer each time they cleaned their shy privates down there. The creator must have endowed women with the same patience when he created things, so that they would not feel drained and bored when cleaning the complex and beautifully structured organs. The soft flesh, inside and out, gouged and washed by feel, with controlled force, was also pleasurable. "Let's go bathe that big crocodile," Poe said to Sarit with a smile. The two girls grinned and leaned toward me. This posture of the body lying down in the stream with half of the head exposed is but a bit similar to the crocodile. Seeing the two girls approaching, I could only remain motionless. There was nowhere to crawl. Standing up would scare them instead. The starry sky leaked down soft moonlight. Two young girls standing carcass. Trips in the stream is getting closer and closer. Snow, white belly, Poe's curved smooth to the end. Hard to find the color. Sarit's, but already velvet grass. Ding fresh, with a mysterious call. Two pairs of white and pink knees, one left and one right, softly to my shoulders. Sarit said with affection, "You lift up your back. We will help you wash." I put my legs straight up in the water, slightly closed, so that the back of the surface of the water. Poe was very anxious, just wanted to wave the delicate little hands to scrub, but was Sarit pulled back and said, slowly, "Don't touch the wound." Poe hurriedly, meaty palms gently stroked on my back. Sarit is a meticulous girl. With her small pink hands, she gently scrubs my ass for fear of hurting me. Poe knows that her hands are not as steady as Sarit's, so she only scrubs the area away from the wound. The water in the flowing stream was so fast and slow that the surface of the water was sometimes high and sometimes low, making my buttocks appear and disappear like a floating fish in a fishing boat. The two girls could see it all, and without saying a word, they covered their little cherry-fleshed mouths and snickered. The teenage giggles made me feel like a crocodile at the zoo, being directed by its handlers to be stroked by the curious kids, and Poe eventually lost his playfulness and started poking here and there at my ass with his fingers, which were cold from the creek water. Sarit saw her being so naughty, and the two of them giggled. My eyes floated on the surface of the water, still observing the movements around me. My crotch, due to the proximity of the nude girl, was more unrestrained and swelled with abandon. Sarit was seduced by Poe's playfulness and also, at times, put her jade hand over to touch my buttocks, wanting to verify how much fun it is to be down, and would make Poe laugh so happily. In a woman's gentleness, there is an innate sense of knowing and caring for men. After scrubbing my back, Sarit put her hands into the water and scrubbed my arms and chest, and when Poe saw her doing it, he followed suit. The way I am now, it is very difficult for them to scrub me. If I turn over, I am afraid that my bottom will be like an eel in a half-day's rage, and it will come out of the water, swaying from side to side, and I don't know which young girl it will bite. Poe always wanted to scrub faster than Sarit. The slender little hands did not scratch my chest a few times before running to rub my belly. Really want her to give me a bath alone. I guess even the Mud cannot be cleaned. Ah, true. With Poe's shriek, my belly and spine twitched involuntarily, and I felt the thing in my crotch, swollen to the point of almost grasping at straws, clutched by several thin, soft fingers with a little too much force, causing the slanting, upward-facing thing to pucker twice in a row as if it were trying to break free from the soft, squishy grip and scurry out of the water to escape. Sarit looked at me differently for a moment, thinking that I would suddenly crouch down and grab the trout that Poe said was underneath me. I made no move, still lying motionless in the water like a tamed crocodile, but Poe stood up with a whistling sound and ran out into the stream. Snake. There's a snake. As soon as Sarit saw Poe's fearful expression, he followed suit and quickly got up and jumped over the edge of the stream. The two girls stood naked at the edge of the stream, looking at me with eyes full of fear and wondering how I had no defense reaction. The snake is gone, I said sullenly. The two girls were still too hesitant to come any closer. It was a trout that has swum away, I said again. Only then did they hesitantly return to me. Sarit's handsome, pink face with lingering shock scolded Poe. Look at how you scared me. Poe hemmed and hawed in embarrassment and helped me scrub up again. On the way back to the cave, Sarit in front of me came to Poe's ear, whispered questions. Too carcass seductive girl, whispering for a while, at the same time looked back at me, mysterious and laugh. Miyu had already gone to bed with the baby, and Sarit and Poe, naked and beautiful, lay down together on the sleeping bearskin, when Poe suddenly sat up again and stretched out her fine arms to me, asking me to go over and lie down and cuddle her to sleep. I put my pants back on and squeezed in between the two icy girls' bodies, wrapped my arms sideways around Poe and began to sleep. Sarit squeezed her soft and elastic breasts on my back. Her belly didn't lean over for fear of touching my wound. A young girl who has been bathed is truly like a lotus flower in the water, her fragrance overflowing. While much of the day's fatigue was washed away by the stream, weariness struck the whole body at once, and we all soon fell asleep. My ears were still stubbed and froze, and the Millida gun rested smoothly in front of my head. The sudden addition of nearly 2,000 pounds of fresh meat too. The cave was highly likely to invite new beasts. The giant bearskin was too damp with lice and fleas, and needed to be exposed and processed before sleeping on it. Sleeping in the middle of the night, the wooden door rustled and rattled. I was startled out of my sleep, copied the dense forest gun, triggered the safety aimed at the dark and ghostly cave outside. Tucked in the thumping heart, look at the giant bear skin behind me, piled up large stacks of fresh meat. Really afraid of the cave mouth appeared again, a similar behemoth, even if you take the meat to feed the beast, but also cannot be pacified by the strong smell of meat stirred up by the crazy attack. Through the firelight that suddenly flickered a bit in the cave, two ghostly green eyes showed up. For a moment, cold sweat immediately seeped down my spine, judging from the outline of the pair of discreet eyes that were held out. It should be a leopard. My heart relaxed a little. The bullets of the dense forest gun are still very lethal to wild leopards that have relatively weak fur. If it really dares to paw out a broken hole in the wooden door and burrow in to eat meat or injure someone, I can shoot it into a beehive right away. There are already 2,000 pounds of beast meat, so adding another 100 or 10 pounds of it would be good on the contrary, except that the bullets are too much of a waste. The sound of a wooden door being pulled out was only a few clicks away when a skinny leopard head poked in first. Fear immediately vanished from my entire body, having been startled by a
leopard cat.
It was probably the one that had followed us all the way during the day, forced by its own weak stature and looking at the fresh meat readily available on the three big sledges, which it had not been able to eat. The thieving fellow actually played the trick of stealing. I slowly copied the wooden pole beside the fire. If it stuck its head in the crack of the wooden door or wilted against the root of the wall and slipped in, I smashed it to death with a stick so as not to be scared by it later. This leopard cat is small, naturally sensitive movements. The head is not big, on the contrary, shrewd. Simi copied something, immediately bowed and cocked his tail, make the action of jumping back at any time. This is very depressing to me. Is it necessary to spend a night with this kind of night owl? After dawn, it can find a big tree to go to sleep, and I still have a lot of urgent things to do. Human intelligence and imagination can be cruel and terrible at times. I wish I had a trap to put a pinch of meat on it, and if it dared to take the risk for this insignificant bite, it would immediately have its spine broken by the sharp edge of the teeth, and even if it was lucky, half of its leg would be left behind to escape. But I can only imagine so much now. To say that the need for tools that really cannot be counted now can have an axe and saw, really more precious than farmers have a car. Meat as a bite cannot be fed to the leopard cat. Really let it eat beautiful. Will come every day in the future. The cave as a welfare society is not bad, and then I am afraid of its mouth to eat out of. The flavor, attracting more leopard cats and even large beasts. I felt a stone in the darkness, holding in my hand. If I can hit it on the head, the pain will reduce the cat's greed, but also to let it know, in this confrontation with me, not as good as going to the woods to catch a few squirrels to eat really. Just at the moment I thought to myself that the leopard cat had wandered off, I flung up my arm and hurled it at it. While the stone was still tossed in midair, the leopard cat nimbly jerked its head out of the way and ducked. It ended up hitting the wooden door hard and smashing off a bit. As soon as the sound of the collision came out, the chuffing footsteps of the leopard cat, spreading its feet to escape, could be heard. Finally, also scared at a jump. This kind of guy has thick, soft meat, pads under the paws, when capturing small birds and mice, quiet as hell. This moment to flee for his life, and no light hunter's elegant demeanor. Although the leopard cat was disturbing my sleep, teasing it added to the fun. Poe and Sarit slept soundly. Only Miyu was woken up by the sound of stones hitting the wooden door. I went over to her and kissed her on the forehead to give her some comfort. I went over and stroked her hair and kissed her on the forehead to give her some comfort, telling her that there was a cat trying to steal food. Maybe in her previous life there was a pet cat. Knowing that the aggressiveness of that kind of animal is minimal, and releasing her fears, she smiled at me and closed her flirty and seductive pretty eyes again and fell asleep. I am also sleepy, do not want to be troubled by such a small animal. If it really has the courage and then steal food, it means that it is indeed very hungry, just like when we are drifting on the sea. That kind of hunger feeling. As long as it does not harm the sleeping people, let it steal a few mouthfuls of animal meat is not harmful. Chapter 29. Wild Eyes. The leopard cat did not return to steal food, and the early seabirds, not long after they had risen, I struggled to open my leaden eyelids, thankful that it was not raining. The women were still sleeping soundly, and waking Poe and Sarit would not help them now. Yanking a chunk of fresh meat from a tall stack, I peel and cut it with a dagger, hoping to get everything done before the sun starts to shine, just waiting to dry. Firewood is also not much left. Always pick up dead branches and dry leaves to burn is not a solution when cutting down trees to make wooden walls, just to cut down the outer joints of the side branches, the sun into dry firewood, not only resistant to burning, the smoke is also less. When the sun began to shine, has chipped out more than 500 pounds of meat. Sarit and Poe sleep. Is still sleeping soundly. I went over. Maybe this time in the morning, the air is cooler. The two young girls' tender carcasses frozen cold, naked sticking crowded together. If you are squatting at the feet of two sleeping girls, the soft female curves will easily guide the line of sight, slipping into the mysterious buttocks and stocks gap through the mercy of the beautiful. Sarit rolled over in her sleep, mistaking Poe's body for mine. Her long, slender, beautiful arms wrapped around Poe, and her regal left leg lifted up, resting on Poe's ass. Due to last night's stream cleaning, coupled with Poe's young round buttocks, radiating heat baking, so that Sarit buttock groove in the soft flesh is particularly exposed. Pink crevice edge, fluffy soft slender fuzzy hair, I picked up the dogwood that Po tickled me with yesterday and teased them both in the face. Sarit murmured a few times, woke up to see me, and smiled silently. Po, however, woke up, slowly, with one hand like a cat's front paw, subconsciously patting the dogwood with its bristles, and blinking and grinding her lips for a few times. Her red tongue came out and then wiped it from side to side, and then shrunk back, still stuck in her dream, unable to come out. Po, however, was still stuck in the dream. Sarit saw Po sleeping so honestly, can't bear to see me tease her again. Hard to tickle energy. Pushed Po, make her wake up. Po flashed a few times, just woke up, big eyes, frowning left and right. Can't tell who pushed her awake. Saw the dog's tail grass in my hand. Immediately understand, but didn't say anything. It's getting late. We need to hurry up and dry the meat. If these beasts spoil, it's a big problem. Sarit and Po come back from washing in the stream at the cave entrance and start baking breakfast. I continue to slice up the meat. Miyu wakes up and wants to drink some water. Sarit uses a simple wooden cup and serves some from a stone basin, cools it down well, and gives it to Miyu. Seeing that Sarit takes such good care of her, Miyu can't help but reach out, caress her handsome cheeks, and smiles sweetly at her. Miyu is very happy to see that she is so well taken care of, but she can't help but smile at her. After breakfast, the temperature was felt in the sunshine, and in 2 or 3 hours more the light would be intense and become poisonous. I took all the peeled meat, carried it out of the cave, and laid it on the dry stones by the stream, where Po and Sarit began to spread it out on the stones in neat 4 square yards with their soft, white little hands. Just yards of sunshine 1/3, or dark or light purple meat, the stream on both sides of the stone block, covered into a dark and heavy piece. This is a giant bear and predator before death, did not put clean blood, extrusion clogged in the blood vessels. Such meat color is very poor in the store. Cannot be sold at a good price, cooked and chewed. The taste is very poor. But for us, stranded on an island, as long as we can fill our hungry stomachs and provide our bodies with the energy to survive, there is nothing to be picky about. I carried out all the meat left in the cave and placed it by the stream for cutting, so that I could protect it in time in case a predator ran over to grab it or attack Sarit and Po. At this moment, the dense forest gun and 3 pistols are hanging on me, even the long-range sniper rifle that can easily shoot a person to death within 1,000 meters is intentionally standing at the entrance of the cave. If a leopard or a wild boar were to appear wandering in the distance, waiting for an opportunity to attack, I would shoot it with that leaf. It would be foolish and dangerous to try to drive them away at low cost with sticks and stones. Toward noon, the 2,000 pounds of meat were cut up and were yoked by Sarit and Po on either side of the stream in a long line, which made a magnificent sight from a distance. As long as these food on the ground can be safely tanned and stockpiled into the cave, only then is it finally owned. Put down the worry. I copied the rifle, climbed up to the top of the 10-meter waterfall where the stream falls, and observed the surrounding situation from the sniper's scope. Really afraid to see in the mirror image of the wild leopard mountain bears is from the distant woods or on the valleys, running towards here. It would have been better if I had been able to divide myself. One I would have continued to crouch and watch from the roof of the cave, and the other I would have gone down and cut down the trees. But it was still early enough in the day to do something else, and I must not be idle. I had to push forward the time for the surest safety. So I climbed down to the top of the cave and went to the little grove by the stream to get timber. And though it was dangerous to do so, and it was impossible to predict the appearance of the beasts of prey, yet what day and what thing had not been an adventure since we had been on the island? The large patches of meat along the creek are more likely than ever to attract beasts of prey, and instead of being locked in a cave to escape greater potential danger than ever before, Po and Sarit join me in the grove to do my work, and after I've kicked down the trees, the 2 of them break off the thin branches on them and carry them back to the cave to expose them to the sun and stock up on dry firewood. To live on this pristine desert island, Poe and Sarit are not to be treated like delicate princesses in need of protection at all times. Now in this situation, both physically and psychologically, they have to adapt as soon as possible. The inert consciousness and alertness developed from human society adjust the original survival. Nature, participate in the surrounding environment, and rely on a strong, courageous, and optimistic character to survive for a long time. If a person fell to this such a deserted island, the cause of death is often not hunger and the attack of fierce animals, but talking to the stone. No response, lonely to the point of going crazy. Choose to commit suicide. The sun emits a fiery light and shines on my spine. The delicate skin of the two girls, also baked red, creak a large piece of food steaming with moisture, so the mood of labor is very pleasant. Even if the blue sky more than a few cloudy, cover the hot sun baking, will immediately make us apprehensive, not to mention the rain that sprinkles down again, crying, who still cares about doing? To get that romantic mind. On the ground across the 50 or 60 arm-thick trees, are first cut by the dagger mutilated and then stomped down by flying kicks, every 10 broken trees. I climbed up to the top of the cave with sniper scopes peeping into the valley and the woods of the movement. I couldn't see anything unusual and went back to the grove to cut down the trees. Finger-thick branches and leaves, by two. Girls laughing and joking to split down, and then thicker, by me to break or stomp off. They ran to hold to, busy body sweat. The cave entrance of the firewood has long been stacked high, with the hill-like Sarit and Poe dry hot and heavy. I constantly praised the fruits of her labor, so that only a kind of joyful feeling supporting the labor. I also cut a lot of flexible and strong hemp vine, 7 trees braided and tied in a row. When poured on the ground, looked like a raft. Push up, it can only play a door, a board. For my intention, to build a wooden wall, look at the top of the route, is the rock face of the mountain. I moved those 180 pounds of heavy boulders, leaning against the rock wall to start yards, leaving gaps in the middle, every yard of 1 meter to put a tied stick board inserted, and then with fine gravel, poured into the loose places. This way to build a wooden wall, like grabbing back a handful of mahjong. First set up a card, estimating the distance from this ledge, across the stream in the middle, to the ledge at the other end, is at least 50 meters. 7 armfuls of trees, braided out to an average length of 1 meter. Yards to the head, it would take about 350 trees. This wide and lush grove, cut down 1,000, and on the whole, look very little different from the original. Poe and Sarit were not idle at this time. They were squatting on both sides of the stream, turning the drying meat, so that the bottom layer would be dehydrated as soon as possible. Looking at the height of the sun, I gave Sarit a dagger and told them to pick out those pieces of meat that had already dried, poke a hole in the center with the knife, and then put them in the hole after threading them through the dry sisal vines. If you wait until the sun goes down to clean up, I'm afraid I can't do it in a moment, and the sniper's scope can't detect anything in the dim light, so I can't feel the danger that's slowly approaching and lurking. I was in the middle of moving rocks around the stream and building a 5th stickboard when Poe suddenly yelled out, "Panther!" Wild panther. I couldn't look around in time and sprinted toward her, and Sarit, stretching out my burly arms, hooking them left and right, scooping them both up into my arms, scurrying to the mouth of the cave and pushing in. Copying the sniper rifle, I flicked on the safety and, by feel, swung toward where the jungle leopard might be, looking for a target to take it down from afar. This kind of leopard beasts attack people extremely fast, running to 10 meters away from the target. It leaps up, 2 sharp hook claws on the front feet, will tear the human skin to the bottom. In this instant, its flexible head has long been to the face of the prey, with the teeth of the ferocious bite on the throat, forcefully tugging and yanking. With the aid of this tension, the leopard hips will be violently lifted upward again. The 2 front paws more forcefully dug into each other's meat, dead, not to let go. until it feels completely cut off the breath of its prey. Until it feels the prey, completely out of breath, will drag the body, go to the tree or grass to chew. After half a day of scanning the sniper's scope, he didn't find the leopard Poe said he saw in the exposed section of the creek, but he saw a leopard cat at the top of the rock wall, which, judging from its color and size, should be the same one from last night. I don't know which big shady tree it was lying on, sleeping beautifully, or sleeping in a naive way, was awakened by the smell of meat, drying by the creek, and then flashed its obscene eyes and eerily appeared at the top of the rock. I was instantly a little annoyed. This lewd fellow, who had scared me once since last night, was irritating to keep appearing so presumptuously. I am also not too angry to shoot it with bullets. Searching for the foot, pick up a stone, aimed at the leopard cat swung over. Snap a crunch, the stone in front of the hairy paws on the rock wall. Stone end splash, up a white smoke, a small handful of powder embedded in the rock wall of the impact, forming a white spot, as if the human brain, by the stick knocked up a meat bag. Chapter 30. The cage that seduces the creatures. When the leopard cat saw the stone flying towards it, it did not have the sense to dodge. It seemed that it predicted that the stone would not hit itself. However, the loud sound of the strikes scared the leopard cat to take a step backward. As expected, it was an exquisite cat, from the eyes that stared at the beast meat by the stream with obsessive greed. It could be seen how disdainful it was of this kind of stone-throwing attack by humans. Perhaps the leopard cat, seeing a human for the first time, looking at our looks with neither sharp claws nor sharp teeth, launching a threat, only throwing a stone and slow, with lousy precision, but possessing such an abundance of tanned meat, might be jealous for a long time and depressed for a long time. If you catch up in the mercenary camp at that time, the Gunmore bombs really hate to give the leopard cat, not to hit the head, special shooting hind legs, really let it taste the taste of technological civilization. Leopard cat standing on the top of the rock is very high, even if it is physically sensitive, but can only look from afar, drooling and salivating. I called Sarit and Poe out of the cave and told them it was a false alarm, and we all went back to work and got busy. By the time the red sun fell over the valley, all the fresh meat on the rock was dry and curled up, soft and slightly watery in your hand, and with another day's exposure to the sun, you wouldn't have much trouble storing it. Even if it rained, these wilted pieces of meat would last for 3 days. Has been rapid construction of wooden walls, but the overall progress is not very big, basing to the body. Aches only built out 5 meters distance. Miyu helped us bake the dinner. After the children were put to bed, she took it easy and did what she could. Poe and Sarit ate well, but it was a pity that there was no rice, oil, or salt. Otherwise we would have marveled at Miyu's skill as a cook. After the cave door was blocked tightly, we all worked. In the cave, Poe and Sarit continued to wear a lot of jerky that didn't have time to get ready with the hemp vine. I carried more than 30 pieces of wood into the cave and tied them up first, so that, when tomorrow comes, we can use the ready-made stickboards. The firelight inside the cave was a little dim, but it didn't affect the sight of doing these rough jobs. Compared to being exposed to the wild during the day, the heart was much more solid at this moment. Everyone talked and laughed. The wooden wall was only built up a little, but everyone's feeling of safety rose a lot. After tying up the 4 planks of sticks, there was not enough sisal to go around, so they would have to do it again tomorrow. Poe and Sarit threaded all the jerky, and yards of it were placed in a circle on the rocks. The 2 girls must be very tired after a busy day with me, so I urged them to go to sleep. Poe was lying on the bearskin and couldn't stop tilting her head up to look at me. The youngest Poe, who was scared and had to be held by me before she dared to fall asleep, has now made a habit of doing so. I went over to touch her head, told her and Sarit to rest early. Tomorrow there are heavy things to do, and I now need to do some tools and then sleep. Poe flashing big eyes, some reluctance, Sarit held over her head to coax her. Poe then obediently no longer always look at me, not a moment to fall asleep. I took the remaining slightly thinner wooden poles, cut them into mini 1-meter-long sticks, stepped on the boulders where the meat was placed, and inserted them into the high rock crevices. Those skewered slices of meat, and then a day in the sun, so that the moisture is thoroughly exposed. To dry, you can use the long wooden poles lifted up, hanging firmly on the top, not only ventilation, to facilitate preservation, but also not easy to be slipped into the beasts to eat, only to let them smell, look at, and helplessly give up the idea of stealing other people's food. Fresh meat in the sun for a day. The thick fishy smell removed a lot, the beasts in the distance. More difficult to smell to get, only the abominable leopard cat. Not only smell the smell and witnessed several times, to easily dispatched it, it is best to get it dead. Wooden stick swinging it. Stone children smashing, in its eyes, just like the slow motion played in the movie, the leopard cat is. Playing with the drift to dodge my attack. All men have no desires. Animals can be damned if they do. I use the cut sticks, make a strong cage. 4 sides, a piece of the mouth. In the cage placed a small handful of meat as bait. If the leopard cat got inside, it would surely pick up the meat bait and run away to eat elsewhere. I just need to bolt a hemp vine to the meat, and the other end of the vine is tied to a diagonal stick, which is right on top of the wooden stick board that closes the cage door, and the board is closed from the inside to the outside, and the area is larger than the opening of the cage. By the time the leopard cat realizes that bumping and scratching and biting are of no avail, unless the claws turn into, like fingers and lift up the wooden stick boards, it will have to wait for the trap setter to adjudicate its fate. I'm sure the leopard cat doesn't mimic the movements of a human, being like a circus animal, and if it did have that kind of intelligence, it wouldn't have ventured into the trap. This pristine island and its animals may be the first time in history that a trap designed by the human brain has been encountered. If this deserted island is inhabited by many natives who are often caught in traps, then this cage I am now making is a real joke. After the wooden cage was done, I used one hand to imitate a leopard cat myself, rehearsing the whole process of capture aside, imagining the process of probably trapping it. At dawn, Poe and Sarit woke up before me again, both girls holding a dog's tail in their hands, which woke me up from my sleep. When I opened my eyes, I saw the fragrant barbecue meat on the stone basin, listened to the seabirds chirping outside the cave, and knew that it was a good day again, so I couldn't help but feel happy. After breakfast, the 3 began to carry the half-dried animal meat out of the cave, continue to dry. By the time dusk falls, this sun-dried meat will be completely air-dried. Catch a day of heavy rains and pouring rain, and hide in a hole and chew them beautifully, while the other furry creatures of the island are not always as comfortable as we, the outsiders, are. The giant bear's skin and the white python with the busted head have been soaking in the pit pool where I keep the trout in captivity for a day and a night. The lice and fleas on the skin must have drowned out by now. I pulled the bearskin from the cave to expose it to the sun to prevent any more creepy crawlies, and Poe and Sarit's bodies are structurally different from mine, so their skin and urinary tissues are susceptible to infection if they don't take care of their hygiene. The white python's tail was bolted by me to a fixed stake. My left hand dragged up the heavy body of the python. My right hand's dagger was inserted into the small hole where the snake's belly was. Defecating, and along the center, it was vertically cut to the head of the python, and the white, spotted and yellow-striped skin was open, and inside the fat and scarlet flesh of the snake was immediately turned outside out, and the dirty blackened blood that was held back all day long inside. The dirty body flowed down along the slit and onto the left hand of the python that was clutching it, and fell into the stream 1 drop at a time. Seeing this color was far more relaxing than looking at its skin tone made it, and before it was cut, I was flooded with goosebumps, and only now, seeing the bright red plasma that spread over most of the python's body, did the chilly hairs all over my body naturally plop back down into my flesh and uniformly stick to the columns. The white python's meat is very tender, I cut it into strips, and those jerky ride together. The white python skin is always uncomfortable to look at. This kind of thing, if there is a marketplace, it is a precious thing. Miyu has been bare bottom, lying and sitting down to recuperate from the injury. More often, cannot see the awkwardness, but after a few days of the injury is better, stand up and walk, it will be embarrassed. The soft python skin is just right for Miyu's delicate skin. Just one no tailor on the desert island, two no needle and thread, difficult to stop me. Thinking of these, I think of the previous town, and I slept with the woman. The heart welled up some sadness. Miyu's plump buttocks, walking, snow-white buttocks bouncing up and down. If the python skin, made into pants, absolutely not enough to cover her plump torso. If made into a simple skirt, but can be stretched to make do, but she sat or squatted down, shy private hairs will be exposed to a great deal of the two white jade soft thighs. If a little bit of attention to the forked open a little bit, the dark brown slit will be flashed showing the clip of the pink flesh buds. But when I think about it, I'm the only man on the island, and there is a deep ambiguity between Miyu and me, and how hot it is on the island. It is indeed a bit self-contradictory to put on this piece of python skin, but the inertia of the human civilization still makes me feel that it's better to have a private part covered than none at all. After slaughtering the white python, I climbed to the top of the cave with my rifle and watched for movement around me. There were no spies of the beasts that worried me, and I could safely go to cut down the trees. In my mind, I wondered where the elusive leopard cat had run off to, and that it should not be in the neighborhood. So, I cut a bit of fresh python meat as bait and put it in that special wooden cage last night, and climbed back to the roof of the cave and went around to the top of the rock where the leopard cat had appeared yesterday and set the mechanism and placed it there. The leopard cat has a very sensitive nose, and just in time to sense the call of the bait in the wooden cage, threw itself into the net. Returning to the building of the wooden wall, I inserted the braided stick panels into the rocky voids and secured them firmly. With yesterday's experience and today's epiphany, I was able to build the wall much more efficiently. Sarit and Po are still folding and collecting dry wood, carrying it back to dry near the cave entrance, and stocking up on dry wood on sunny days is incidentally necessary to keep the cold out. In the cold, to illuminate the night, and most crucially to bake food. Miyu was the one who baked the food for us at noon. She seemed to have recovered from her injuries quite quickly, which made everyone happy. When Miyu is healed, she will not only be an extra laborer, but more importantly, a comfort to our souls. Although Miyu's communication with me is very limited in terms of language, she has a delicate mind, which makes up for the man's rough and sloppy side. I want to insist that the wooden wall be built before Miyu recovers, so that she can hold her baby, walk in the yard, breathe the fresh air, brush that charming hair whenever she wants, and also squat down in the stream and put one hand underneath it, patiently scrubbing, like Po and Sarit, to show off the feminine beauty of a woman. The hot rays of the sun were shining on my back again, and the sweat was pouring down to the ground as if I had splashed it with a basin. The heat was unbearable, so I went to the stream to lie down for a while to relieve the heat. When I was feeling the cool water, I suddenly heard a rustling in the forest, like something swarming to pounce. With a whoosh, I stood up vigorously, copied the forest gun placed by the stream, and sprinted toward Po and Sarit. The two of them were shocked at my move, not yet aware of the commotion in the woods. I copied the two girls, who were physically delicate, and raced toward the cave door. That moment, the rattling in the woods became more urgent, and Po and Sarit's eyes showed trepidation, as well as hearing an incoming murderous aura